design thinking and inspirational design briefing, and how those things fit together. So are you familiar with design thinking? How many are familiar with design thinking? Okay, so, design for the first time in history made it to the front page of a Harvard Business Review a couple of issues ago, right? So now design is not something strange in a box, it's gone mainstream. And basically it's been around for like 30 years, and IDEO and Stanford understood how to leverage it about 10 years ago. So that's the soup I've been swimming in when I did my PhD. And that's what we've been using to bring in information into how to develop inspirational design briefing, because you all know you can plan and organize and analyze, but if it doesn't end up in the designer's head, nothing is going to come out of it. All the plan is wasted, right? So this is what I'm going to be sharing with you. Just to demystify, this is basically what design thinking process looks like. So you have the traditional design process from when I was a child, been around forever, and then there's basically added an overlay of user-centered understanding in the beginning, in framing, and then there's added an after-action review in the end, so you build dynamic capabilities and you are better able to take on project next time, because if you have to start, if you haven't learned anything, you have to start at square one every time you start a project, right? But this way you make sure that your information that you learn in your project is being transferred so you can do the next project even better. So that's basically how it works like, and this is where the inspirational design brief come in. So it's creating the direction for the designers together with them. So why is design a really good idea, and why is it a really good idea to integrate? So believe it or not, I worked 10 years with BMW and actually brought a vacuum cleaner manufacturer into BMW as a client. So BMW do everything from aircraft interiors to cell phones and shavers and also vacuum cleaners. I think they're on the 7th model now. So this is the Rolls Royce of vacuum cleaners in Europe. It's called Nilfisk, been around since 1920 something. And basically, we worked on a couple of models. This is the original Nilfisk, and here I basically just located them on a scale showing you where design came into the process. And you can see in the beginning it's something that happened in the end. And then, with the one we did here, the first one, we came into the direction phase and helped defining that. But if you look at Dyson, which is one of Nilfisk's competitors, right, the founder and the CEO is a designer himself. So design doesn't get more integrated than that, right? So they're very, very hard to compete with. They're doing exceptionally well. So that's an example on integrating design up front. And then there's some statistics from Denmark. So if you said no design, so you're not using any design, and your revenue is 100, right? If you go out and hire a designer afterwards to develop your concept and want somebody to make it look good, this is what we call putting lipstick on a pig, then you lose 10% revenue. So hiring a designer after you've done your concept is not a good idea. It's not because it's a bad designer, but it's because of the miscommunication, misunderstandings, not getting things aligned, being hurried. So designer after the fact, that's when you want to lose money. That's like lottery, right? Here, if you integrate design in the process, you get an additional 9% over if you didn't use design. So process integration makes sense. That pays off. And then the study shows that you get 110% than if you integrate it with your business innovation process. Does this surprise you? Does that look weird? I'm messing with you, right? I mean, integrating with business and innovation, you get 1% more. Well, I've spoken to a lot of other very smart people that I enjoy hanging out with. And basically here, it's a sign of opportunity. Today, they're just not doing it well enough. And this is a broad scope of 1,600 Danish companies. So that's where we said, if we can do a better integration of design and business innovation, we can squeeze, all studies show at least 30% more out of that than what they're doing today. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, connecting the dots, right? I mean, how can it be? It's not that complicated. There's nothing mystic about design. So you start out with, you have your organization and you have some kind of assets, your culture, your organizational architecture, your teams, and how you do things, right? And some finances or stuff, right? And you need to link your stuff and your culture and your routines with your business model, right? Because if they're not linked, your business model is not going to be able to execute, right? And the information comes from your culture and your assets, right? These 9 elements from the business model canvas are then linked into the design brief which also consists of 9 design elements. And that's what I'm going to be talking with you about today, and how to do this linking. And then that's basically linked back to execution. And depending if you're doing, let's say, a design strategy project or a design differentiator project, so design differentiator would be the lowest level of design maturity, and design as a strategy would be the highest level. You can see you need to coordinate different routes. So all it's about is, between business and getting something out in the market, is coordinating the route between your organization, your business model, your design brief, and then getting things iterated out in the market. So that's as simple as it is. So let me talk about the 9 design quality criteria. I know some of you have you heard about it before. So they are grouped into 3 categories. The first one is strategic elements. So the first one is the design philosophy. If you don't have a strong philosophy behind your product, it's like, why? Why are we doing this? Why are we special, right? What are we doing differently? Then nothing really makes any sense at all, right? Then you need to have a really good fit with structure. So structure is your supply chain management, your the ecosystem you are in, the internal structure in your organization, if you're a larger organization. How, if it doesn't work with the structure, it's not going to be working either. The third one is you need to have to work with your innovation capabilities and the innovation level you're comfortable with. So how much market risk, how much technology risk, and how much execution risk are you prepared to take? Some people are a little bit more careful, some a little more daring, so we need them all. Then on the contextual ones, you probably recognize these, right? These are what we call triple bottom line principle. That's planet, people, profit, right? So social human factors, is it helping people? Is it helping the environment? And is it sustainable in business, right? So those are the ones we always talk about. And the last ones are related to executing the design. Because all this is okay, but if you don't execute it, you're going to end up with a couple of drawings and that's it. So you need to have a good process. That's where the 9% comes, right? Then you need to be clear on the functionality. What need is it actually addressing, right? And what functionality is it offering? And then the last one is expression. So this is what in the old days were called styling or aesthetics. But that's kind of at the time is the reputation thing. You can't just be styling. That's not good enough. So at BMW we call it expression. But that's basically what it is. It's not just the look and the feel, but also how it sounds, how it tastes. But, so basically, how does it interact with the human being? So those are the 9 criteria that we have identified as being the most important ones by looking at 81 briefs in industry and academia, as well as looking at design awards. So they can be grouped under these. Any criteria that surprises you? Do you thought, do the designer really need that? No? Should we add some extra ones? like having fun? And as you can see, they're basically addressing the why, how, what, when. So this is where I talk about the innovation part. And you basically want to make sure that you locate yourself best for you in the innovation space, right? So this is one way of mapping the world. You can map a world in a lot of different ways. One is having this is your market risk. So are you dealing with a recognized need? Are you clarifying a need? Or are you coming up with a completely new need, right? That nobody knew they had. So this example would be like the iPad. When I saw the iPad, I had no idea I needed it. Now I can't live without it, right? Clarifying need is like maybe more economically helpful. Maybe there's some kind of feature that makes it more practical, but it's not really a need you already knew you had it. And this is basically the same mode. And here you have, working with current technology. So this is the technology in the industry, so like buttons on coats, right? Applying a new technology, that would be like when Velcro, for instance, came into the clothing industry from a different brand. Suddenly, Velcro was a new technology. And here you can actually develop your new technology yourself. And of course, as you move up those axes, your risk goes up really, really quickly. So that's why you have like 3 main areas. Down here is what we call red ocean. Are you familiar with blue ocean strategy? I see nodding, that's good, yeah. So basically this is where down spiraling profit margins, sharks eating each other, small bits and pieces floating in the water. That's down here, okay? And here you have about 40% failure rate. So, but in the long run, you will end up in the red soup. Up here, and that is my name, Kamikaze country, and I heard that I shouldn't make this presentation in Japan. This is basically where you're going to kill yourself. I mean, it's so risky that the probability of success is so low that 1 in 10,000, 1,000, So this is very, very risky. And that's where like Google come from, right? And Facebook come from. But they're far in between. And then here in the middle, we call it Maverick Shore. Anybody here surfers? You're surfers. So Maverick Shore is a famous surf spot, right? I have to admit, I have the dry surfboard in Southern Cal, but I know this is basically where things are turbulent, things are changing, customers have identified, things are happening. So if you look at the American automotive industry, when it started out, there used to be 4,000 automotive companies in the United States, and now there's 3, one owned by Italians, right? So it just shows about, this is very, very volatile, and it'll change over time, right? So what I'm going to tell you is that this is the breakthrough innovations, these are the incremental ones, and here is the highest expected return. So if you go in and calculate where are the returns actually, they're laying here, they're not up here. It's the unicorns, you know, but here is actually where the expected return is. And the sweet spots for startups is here. You're adding your human value, your human knowledge, your professionalism to identify, to clarifying something, and you're using some kind of technology so you can secure IP, so intellectual property, right? And that's when you have a really good sweet spot for starting out. You can protect your startup. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do we need any islands? Anything that misses in the map? So these are the design quality criteria we spoke about before. I just want to show you which criteria are important depending on where you're playing in the map. So if you're playing down here, our study shows that performance and expression is important. Not surprising. This is your facelifts. Up here, if you're doing breakthrough, you need to look at innovation. The context of those were the triple bottom line. And social human, or the context ones are the especially important ones. And then the other ones are, you know, combination. And here in the middle, you kind of have, that's the hard thing about being an entrepreneur, you kind of have to blend them. You know, it's kind of making a soup from ingredients from other recipes and then putting it together. And then you make your startup. It's not like you're starting from scratch, right? And that's the tricky part of it. So this is the design briefing process that I'd like to share with you. And we just published a book. It came out in November called Design Thinking for Product Development Management Association. And my partner Diego and I, we contributed with chapter 2, which is some inspirational design briefing. So you can find it on Amazon. I don't know what it costs, but I highly recommend it. So if you want to read about the process, otherwise I'd be happy to supply information. So basically, you know, you have your strategy. This is your business, right? Then you have a template for your design brief. So let's say that you haven't done this before, it's the first time. You might want to start out with our template. So we have some recommendations. We say you have 9 design quality criteria, and then you have some recommendations for how you should distribute them. So how much emphasis should you put on the different criteria for a particular brief? And I'll show you that later on. So then you basically take the one that we recommend as a starting point. And if you already have been in business and done briefs before, you go back and analyze your old brief and figure out, you know, where were the emphasis on those, what works and didn't work, and then basically adjust your new briefs to follow those recommendations. And then you want to make sure that, and I'm a little rough here, but you don't want to have an intern sit and write your design brief on Friday evening when it has to go out, right? that's like suicide, right? You want to make sure that the brief is taken serious. It's not just taking the last Microsoft brief and putting, you know, Intel on or something like that, and then sending it out to another client, right? You know, you really want to think about your brief, because the more you think about your brief, the better the designer is going to be able to operate. And your brief is actually not just writing a brief. Your brief is a part of the problem-solving process. When you're defining what you're going to be doing, when you're defining those 9 elements, you have to a large extent actually also define the direction and the solution you're going to find. So you need to be aware about that. So you don't want to leave it to an intern at the last moment, or somebody in marketing, or someone in engineering, or someone. You basically want people from different departments, different stakeholders, to each write a 2-page brief covering those design quality criteria. And then you want to, it's the wisdom of the crowd, and then you want to consolidate those briefs into one brief, right? And then you want to compare them to what you know about the database, about previous projects, and the profile of the design quality criteria, and figure out how much emphasis is there. Because if you look at a brief, I mean, you can write a brief that's 100 pages long, right? And nobody will read it. That's not going to happen. Design brief needs to be somewhere between 750 and 1500 words. So if you can't boil it down to that, you're not doing a good job. So make sure you're boiling it down to, you know, 2 or 3 pages, and then having the right emphasis of various things in the brief instead of just having everything there. A design brief is not the finished product. It's like the 20-80, right? It's the 20% that, you know, get you 80% of the benefits. And then basically you consolidate the briefs, and then you either have to rewrite, or you can send out the brief. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's common sense, I know, but people don't do it today. I mean, most organizations cram it out at last moment and forget to switch the name, of the client, and then it gets really embarrassing.
Sorry?
Yeah, sure, please.
On the rewrite, does it sometimes involve getting the actors together in a room to talk about their differences?
So it's a really good idea to have everybody meeting in one meeting, right? And looking at the briefs and talking about it here. And then you can have somebody writing it and sending it out to everybody afterwards. You don't have to meet every time. Yeah. But you want to make sure that everybody put the Hancock on it, because if people don't agree, it's not gonna happen. Yeah, so let's talk about those trade-offs. I think you can't write to 100 pages, right? You need to balance the brief with the different criteria. And this is a good example. So this is looking at those 81 briefs I talked about. So this is how much the brief focused on process, and this is how much the brief focused on expression. So that's the styling, the aesthetics, the feel, and the touch of the product. If you have marketing information, engineering information, any information, branding information about what the product is supposed to look like, give it to the designers. Don't let the blue sky and hide in a box somewhere and come up with it themselves. It's not it's a losing strategy. Basically what happens is a negative linear trade-off between the two. So the more information you give the designers to be able to organize, handle, and process and analyze, the less time you have to spend in the process, right? On explaining the process. And the less you give them, right, the more you have to tell them about the process, right? So those two things negative correlate. And the problem is that so does it with your profit. So basically, the risk of going over budget, so the ones that are big red bubbly ones are the ones that went over budget. This is how much they went over budget. But the small blue ones are the ones that didn't, but was on the right side, in black. So basically, the less you give them information, the more they have to look, and the more risk there is that they will go budget. Does that make sense? If you don't know what you have, it's going to take longer time. It's getting more risky. So if you have information for the designer, make sure that it's communicated so that you basically reduce the risk of going off budget in the design phase. Is that intuitively? Yeah. And this is how you distribute the different components of the criteria. So one of the things, typically don't include designers in strategy. Let them sit and in blue sky, let them come up with ideas. That doesn't work according to the studies we've done at Stanford. Basically, if you increase, if you take an average design brief and you increase the strategy content by 100%, so you double it, you increase investors' interest, user engagement, perceived value. So this is a score that Philip at Stanford attacked into his study and basically compared our data. So if you increase your focus from a regular brief to a high performance brief with 30%, with 100%, then you get a 30% increase in these factors. And at the same time, if you double the focus on the design criteria the designer actually has to design to, the practical design thing, then you are reducing the risk of going over budget by 60%. And the reason why it's so important to get these things right in the beginning is it's like you say you start as you intend to proceed or go on. So if you start by being over budget, it gives a really bad taste in everybody's mouth, and then everything else gets complicated and overmanaged and micromanaged. So being in the black instead of the red in the beginning sets a really good sign to the rest of the organization, and you're going to have a less bumpy road along the way. Anything surprising? Oh. So this is the distribution that we recommend. So if you look at a brief that's 750, 1500 words long, this is basically the distribution of the various criteria, and I'd be happy to provide a detailed one of that one. So your process and making sure clear how we're doing it, what we're doing, when we're doing it, and so forth, and resources. That's a big part of getting that clear and squared away. Then I would like to bring the design criteria and design performance into what we're doing. So Augustine and Chuck and I, we have applied design science, and we were fortunate to team up with the Index Award last year. So do everybody now know who the Index Award is? It's the largest monetary design award in the world, biannual, gave out $560,000. And we teamed up with them and got access to the data and did research with them, and basically looked at a sample of 250 of the 1,123 applicants and analyzed them for design quality. And what we found out here was there was a very interesting trade-off that these are the ones these are the ones that was the winners. And these were the ones that was deemed fundable when they had an investor day following the award. So these are the ones the investors were interested in funding. And you can see they have a very nice linear correlation. So basically, the more risk you're taking on, so the less probability of success, the more design quality you need to be able to be investment worthy. And that makes sense. The more risk, the more convinced you have to be about the design is going to be right? If you're taking on less risk, design is, you're a little bit more loose on the design. So basically that defines a frontier between what's non-investable and what's investable. And just to take some examples from our old little pond. So I did research on LA Tech Day last year, and this is where the LA Tech Day companies fell into the 25 I looked at. And we had the startup weekend here a couple months ago at the Cross Campus, and this is where the startup companies were located, the 7 that were a part of the process. Interestingly, they were very closely grouped, so I wonder if they were rubbing shoulders with each other and learning, and since the results scored very similar. So this is kind of what you can expect from I would say a high quality startup weekend, right? From regular companies in Los Angeles areas, and the other ones are high impact and international contributors from all over the world, from Singapore, from Australia, from and this is our dashboard that basically helps you figure out if you've done the inspirational design briefing, you end up with a final design. How is your design performing? And here you see again, this is an example. I have two examples. One is called Gizmo, and the other one is called Gasmo. So the Gizmo is the one that did well, right? And it's actually a design company that creates its own products in Stockholm, Sweden. So they know how to do the design well. And you can see here, this is our assessment of the organization's design, and this is their assessment of it. And we are very much in alignment, right? And we look at where we put them in the risk matrix. We are very much in alignment. And I didn't look at their scores until I'd done my own, right? So it's not biased. Here it shows about the balance between the probabilities of success of market, technology, and execution. And they're well balanced. If they're very unbalanced and you start multiplying them, if you say one is nearly 0, right? Then those numbers get really, really small, right? So you want them as balanced as possible, and you want to make sure you're at least leveraging, let's say you're very good at executing, you want to make sure that at least you leverage your execution abilities. In the last part of the scorecard, you basically look at the 9 design quality criteria. So here you can see that we looked at how jaggedy it is. So the more jaggedy it is, it talks about design inconsistency, that it's not consistent design. And the more difference there is between the internal and external score, the more the team is out to lunch, right? they believe their mother instead of somebody else, mother, sister, and wife, right? So this is an example of a very well balanced scorecard. Are you guys ready for some gas? So this is Gasmo. Here it's also a design company. It's in Barcelona, northern Spain, coming out with a product. And here you can see they think their design is really the best in the world. Maybe not, right? They also think they are taking less of a risk on the market, and we see them as taking more of a risk, right? Here, they're not really leveraging a design as much as they could. The design team should be able to perform better on execution, right? And here on the last one here, the design quality criteria, you can see they're very optimistic about their performance, right? They're all top scored. These are a little bit more different, right? So there's a kind of inconsistency, and I would say that's a clear red flag. That this is something you probably want to go back and talk about and see how you can do it better. Because all this information is really just to help the entrepreneur, and the investor, and the people that are looking at it. How do we make it better? Where do we find gaps? How do we address them? What can we do about them? Or should we abandon it? So. And just to keep honest people honest, this is our company. So we also scored our company. We had 4 business people from outside score our company on the criteria, and then Augustine, Tom, and I. And then I had to admit, I had my wife score it also, because she's been swimming in the soup. Marisha, she was swimming in the soup for a long time, so she knows also what's going on. And basically here you can see is that the external actually think we're taking on this risk than we are. So we're actually a little negative, and our team is a little careful. We think we're taking on more risk than the outside group is thinking. So that's a good thing, right? But the design quality is very much the same perception of design quality, theirs and external and internal. Here, this is the perception of where we are in the market technology risk matrix. So here you can see, we think we are a little bit more new than the other ones think we are. We think a little bit more out there. But maybe we're not as much out there as we think. Maybe we are actually in the sweet spot, right? Here, very good balance of execution, and this, strong design team. And here you can see there's not big differences on the scores in the design quality, right? They're very similar. So I would say that's a green flag. Let's go ahead, go racing. Does that help explaining with the couple examples? Then I like to make a little plug-in here. So if you want to learn more about design briefing, design strategy, I'm going to be giving a talk in April on design and business model experimentation. And on Thursday next week, we're going to have Tony Luna come and talk about, let's talk about your passion in design and how to use that to change your life. So at 6:30 at Epic Spaces. So if you want to know more about our team, Design X, that's a good place to learn and have a good conversation. And usually chocolate cookies. So. And that's all I have to say today.